Now, is there anyone here representing, want to be on the Central Committee for this district? Are there any central? There's a gentleman in the back. Please come forward. You'll be our last speaker.
Oh, great.
We say the best for last, right?
No pressure.
Okay. Come on up and introduce yourself.
So I'm going to be very brief. My name is Robert Benjamin. I'm on the Democratic ballot for Central Committee. It gives me meaning to Saved by the Bell. So this isn't a campaign speech because only 4 of us filed for 4 seats from our district, District 12 in Baltimore County. Yeah. I'm counting on you, Aaron.
Yes.
But let me just mention a couple things about the Central Committee, which is not well understood, and why I ran. Just briefly, I was a journalist for 3 decades, another more than decade. I've been in corporate communications using my writing and editing and media skills. So I've worked a long time. And I've gotten involved in Southwest Democrats, the Baltimore County Progressive Democrats Club, which I'm president of now, Catonsville Individuals. And I really am concerned about not only the direction of this country, but the direction of this state and this county. So what does the Central Committee do? Does anybody know what the single mandated role of the Central Committee, whether Republican or Democratic, is? Excuse me?
Get people elected.
That's not mandated.
To develop a platform for the party?
No.
You have to fill the seat.
Yes.
You have to fill the seat if there's a vacancy in the House.
If there's a vacancy during a term, the Central Committee gets together, thank you, Jim, gets together and picks it. That's an important role, and if I'm on the Central Committee as an associate member now, which is not voting, I've been unanimously nominated for an at-large position, which there's supposed to be a confirmation vote this month. So if and when I take a seat, whether it's this summer after the primary or then, I would certainly fulfill that with seriousness of purpose. My view is that that role has had a corrosive effect on what I think the role of the Central Committee is, whether Republican or Democrat. As Michael said, it's to get Democrats elected, it's to turn out the vote, it's to activate voters. We have a lot of folks on the Central Committee who are dual office holders. They hold up, they're a delegate, or they hold a position, elected position, or sometimes they work for a delegate or another elected officer. Their attention is, in some cases, too often on that one mandated role and not working to strengthen what I would call the democratic process, to activate voters. So I've been trying to do that, working with the Central Committee, with the precinct program all across the county. In District 12, we have it, and I've been working with about 10 canvassers, other canvassers, since last summer. And we've just been talking about the values of the Democratic Party, why it's important to vote, why this election is important. My position is when Democrats vote, we win. That didn't happen in the last election in Baltimore County, and hence we have a Republican governor. I don't want to see that repeated. So that in a nutshell is why I decided to run. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that only 4 signed up for the Central Committee. The Central Committee could be a lot more effective in whatever capacity. I intend to work towards that and to strengthen it. I think not only the party will benefit, but Baltimore County will benefit. Thank you.
First, all the candidates for being so brief, which leaves us time for questions for the most important people, the voters. And start off, I think Senator Brochin needs to leave soon. So if there's any questions that you have focused towards the Baltimore County executive candidates. Gentleman there in the gray there. Yes, you sir, with the hand.
I'm Shorty.
Can you get up and turn around?
Please come get around so he can see you.
Stand here.
Where are you coming up here? We'll just stay on the side.
For both of y'all.
All three of us.
All three of y'all. Whoever running for, whoever up there,
Guys,
please.
come up here. That's a good idea. That's what I wanted to do anyway. But terrific. Let's bring you up here. And first of all, questions for the county executive. This gentleman again, right here. Stand up, please, and ask your question.
My name is Shorty. I'm a grassroots advocate. I'm a community advocate. I'm a business owner, Baltimore County resident. My question is to Johnny O. and Senator Brochin and Mr. Redmond. As county executive, you oversee the Baltimore County Police Department, correct? With the dissent decree that's happening in Baltimore City with the corruption and the abuses of power by the Baltimore City Police, I've been watching the Baltimore County Police for the last 12 years, and I've been complaining about their treatment of Hispanics and people of color in Baltimore County. I'm also an ex-felon and a prisoner's right advocate. All right, I came here straight out of the penitentiary. I own a business on Falls Road. I showed you that you can change your life, but you got to have the same equal opportunities. So my question goes to, how are you going to hold the Baltimore police accountable so we don't have the same problems? No, so we can address the same problems that you already have in Baltimore City with the corruption in the police department, the abuses by the police department, and the unchecked things that are going on. You as the executive, how are you going to hold the police accountable to the people? How are you going to stop what's going on? The killing of Corinne Gaines, the killing of Christopher Brown, unarmed black people at the hands of the Baltimore City Police. How are you going to address that? Because that affects my people, my community. The people in this room aren't affected by that. I am.
Start with Senator Brochin.
Thanks. So let me talk about a couple of things that I'd like to as county executive. First of all, I put in a piece of legislation this year based on a video that I saw that happened with an off-duty police officer in the Catonsville area at the Giant Food Store. We have off-duty police officers in Baltimore County right now who get the right to moonlight at other jobs, but they're wearing their uniforms. So the average person who walks into the Giant Food Store or the Wegmans up where I am, you don't know if they're on duty as a Baltimore County police officer or whether they're moonlighting. I spoke to the state's attorney, and the state's attorney says that once they go and chase a suspect or engage in something that's going on, that they automatically become a Baltimore County police officer. Again, whether they're being paid by Wegmans or whether they're paid by Giant. So the bottom line is, in that instance, which happened last year, which you may be well aware of, off-duty police officers don't have to have body cameras. I think body cameras are fantastic. They're the true equalizer to find out what went on. If the police officer's story matches up with the facts, and I put a piece of legislation in that said that if you're an off-duty police officer, well, first of all, the Cabinet Administration said that they would equip off-duty police officers with body cameras. They didn't, and they didn't follow up on that. I put a piece of legislation in that said that they have to do it. We lost 5-3 or 6-2 in delegation. If I'm county executive, I plan on mandating it. I won't need a vote there. We will do it. We will equip all off-duty police officers with body cameras so we find out the facts of what's going on. The other thing is this. We have an opportunity, all of us, if any of us become county executive, to really mold the police department in our vision. And my vision is police officers who are really well trained, and I'm not talking about being trained on internet courses, I'm talking about live training, and they move to a lot of internet courses right now, which I would reverse immediately. We have the opportunity to engage in best practices for de-escalation methods, best practices across the country, which we'll be doing. And then the final thing is this. The best Baltimore County police officer is an educated one. Years ago, they stopped the practice of matching dollars if a county police officer wants to go get a BA degree or a master's degree. We're going to at least match dollar for dollar, if not more. So We incentivize our police officers to get undergraduate degrees if they don't have one, to get master's degrees. So we have the best, most qualified trained police force that engages in all those things. So that's my answer.
Mr. Edmer, please.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that the role of the county executive is to set the tone and the culture of the organization, both in the police department and in other county agencies. And I personally believe that that culture has to be, as I mentioned previously, open, transparent, with expectations and accountability, where all citizens are treated fairly and equally. Additionally, I also am a big fan of the body cameras. I believe that helps create the transparency and accountability, and it's something that I also support.
Okay, thank you. Johnny?
So that we're not here all day, I'll just echo, I also believe body cameras serve an important role, but having the footage is only as good as it's accessible. And Baltimore County's current policies on accessing body camera footage is wholly insufficient. And so as county executive, I'll make sure that we not just record it, but we also make it available so that there is that transparency as to what's occurring with those interactions between our citizens. Obviously, we'll invest in and support additional sensitivity trainings and have officers understand de-escalation methods and be sensitive to the needs of individual communities. But I think the best thing we can do is make information available so that residents can actively, and then also open up opportunities for citizens to actually be providing input as to how reviews are conducted and policies of the police are set. So it's a collaborative.
When you as county executives work with activists and grassroots in the community versus the common practices where y'all just ignore us?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think for me that needs to be something that we have to open up and invite activists and members of the community into the conversation about what's missing and what gaps need to be filled in order to address the concerns you've raised.
Thank you, gentlemen. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, as I mentioned previously, my whole one of the objectives I have is to have a long-term plan with a multi-year budget, working collaboratively with stakeholders all across the county. So that's important. The other thing I think we need to do with the Baltimore County Police Department, and I don't know if this directly or indirectly gets at this issue, is we need more police officers in the communities on patrol. There has been a shift where, if you look at the total number of authorized police officers, that number hasn't changed, but we've taken cops. A recent initiative is the animal abuse team in the county police department. Now, that may or may not be a good idea, but what we're doing is we are taking police officers off the street and transitioning them into specialized units. And most of these specialized units are good, but it's at the risk of taking folks off patrol. I personally believe that when there are issues that happen, it's oftentimes because a police officer is there by themselves and perceive that there may be a risk that may or may not be there.
Senator, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and most of you know that I'm pretty plain spoken, so I can tell you that I'm not real comfortable with the head of the police department now, Terry Sheridan. I found Jim Johnson a lot more community oriented. If I'm county executive, there will be a replacement.
Yes.
Would you, the replacement, would you do a nationwide search, or would you look from within?
You need to go from within.
I'd like to look from within.
Very good. Any other questions for our county executive candidates? Mr. Crinson.
One of the most urgent issues nationally in the state of Maryland is guns. And yet I've heard nobody today even mention the issue. How about you, Captain?
Can I speak to
Sure.
the gun issue? Each one of you?
Sure. I think one of the things that we can do most importantly at the local level is protect and safeguard our schools. And so as county executive, I want you to know the first and foremost thing I'll do is I will oppose any effort to arm our teachers, because as a teacher my job was to teach, not to shoot.
Yes.
as we think about school infrastructure and school safety in that way, I do support the investments that are coming through the state legislature now to do things like have inside locking doors to make schools safer. But even as we improve sort of entryways, we have to recognize that so long as our schools across Baltimore County have trailers, we have students and teachers who are going in and out of the school building all day, jeopardizing their safety and their security. I do applaud the county and support the school resource officer program, particularly at the middle school and high school level. I think we have to be very thoughtful and careful about putting officers in elementary schools, because I know from data has shown that consistently there are higher rates of arrests and other academic problems in schools with high rates of law enforcement. So we have to be thoughtful. And more importantly, I think the best practice is to make sure that resource officers are actually just that, resources, and not seen as extensions of administration or sort of enforcement. They're actually seen as a partner for students and actually can collaborate. I will, as executive, sort of moving forward, advocate for and support efforts at the state. For example, I'm glad to see the legislature acting on banning bump stocks here. Continue to support things like there are other efforts for background checks, but really we need national legislation because what we find is that in Maryland, far too often, guns that are used in the commission of crimes here in Maryland are actually brought from out of state. So despite whatever actions have been taken in Maryland, we need and will support national action on gun reform.
Mr. Redmond.
Yeah, I too believe that we need to create safe schools and make that investment available. And I look at guns as a criminal justice issue. And in Baltimore County, we have an increase in violent crime. We've got an increase in gang activity, and that's got to be a significant focus of the administration.
Senator Brosh.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, getting to the school issue, we're getting ready to dedicate over $150 million this year out of the budget to make sure that our schools are safe and secure. In Baltimore County, we don't need just resource officers in middle schools and high schools, which we have. We need them in elementary schools also, so kids don't have this fear. The other thing in regarding guns in general, and this separates me from Johnny O in the Democratic primary, I voted for the Firearms Safety Act of 2013. It gets rid of AR-15s, it gets rid of other things, but it also, and the reason I supported it, is it takes people who are voluntarily or involuntarily committed into a mental health facility and it takes their guns from them. And the other thing that separates me from the candidates in the Democratic primary is I also voted to take guns away from domestic abusers. So if you are accused of domestic violence, and you have a protective order against you, I voted that when you go before a judge has the right to say, do you have any weapons? And if you do, you will be extracted from your weapons. And I'm the only Democratic candidate running for county executive who supported both of those pieces of legislation.
Gentleman sitting here by the pillar, yes.
Yes, hi. Words are lovely things. In fact, I'm using them right now. What I'm interested in is action, so I'd like the three of you who I believe all have political experience, I'd like you to briefly describe at least two pieces of legislation which you introduced and or spearheaded and the importance of those pieces of legislation. Thank you.
Anyone want to start?
Sure. Well, I'm going to first start by saying I think the first thing that people deserve are leaders who can admit when they got something wrong. And I will be the kind of county executive to say, while I was balancing a conservative district and parts of the bill that I didn't support, I've always supported common sense gun legislation. But as a father, and in light of a lot of the violence we've seen, there are decisions I can look back and say I got something wrong. So I'm happy to have that conversation, Senator. I'm also happy to say I support banning guns on campus, which is something that I can say I'm the only Democrat who has a record of opposing and not voting to kill. So I take public safety very seriously. As it relates to your question, sir, the two pieces of legislation I'm most proud of, and I'm the only Democrat who consistently has supported this, was I was the original sponsor of earned sick leave and safe leave, so that domestic abusers, for example, women have the opportunity to take time from their employer to go get those judicial reliefs, so that people who are working aren't forced to choose between their family and their job. It was finally enacted, and the governor's veto was overridden this year, and I was the lead sponsor of that, and I'm the only Democrat running who supports that legislation. I'm also the person who was the lead sponsor of a program called EARN, Employment Advancement Right Now, which is Maryland's new job training program. It started as a $3 million program under Governor O'Malley. It's now a $10 million program under Governor Hogan. It's actually something I called for as a candidate that I was going to bring to Baltimore County, and interestingly enough, the county executive has recommended a $1.5 million job training program called Baltimore County Connector that will be voted on by the council in May. So I'm proud of sort of being a bold leader on any range of issues as the lead sponsor.
And Mr. Redmer?
So I'm struggling.
Well, because you're the Maryland State Insurance Commissioner.
I am. It has
Yeah.
been 15 years since I was in the House of Delegates. So I'll mention one from then and one from the Insurance Administration. I was one of the sponsors that created the health insurance reform measure in Baltimore, in Maryland. That was the standard until the Affordable Care Act was created. And I think most folks will agree that we got it right, while the United States Congress got it wrong. The other issue that I'll talk about very briefly is when I was insurance commissioner the first time, we changed multiple laws related to how the state responds to flooding issues. If anybody remembers Hurricane Isabel, which was a train wreck in the state of Maryland, there were many problems with the program. Most were at the federal level because the state doesn't regulate the federal flood program. We can't regulate the federal government, although there are times I wish we could. But there were a number of issues regarding education of producers and folks that were actually selling this stuff that didn't know anything about it, so we went back to the General Assembly and got that fixed to create higher standards and accountability.
Senator Bershon.